With just over 2 months to go until the general election, opinion pollsters have consistently put Labour marginally ahead of the Conservatives by 1%. That, coupled with the SNP and UKIP insurgencies, implies that neither party will be able to secure a majority, and thus another hung parliament is seen as a near certainty, as illustrated by websites such as May25.com, that puts both Labour and Conservatives virtually neck and neck on 270 seats, far distant from the 326 required for an overall majority. This analysis and the concluding detailed seats per party forecast are based on the following two articles published at the Market Oracle website on the 28th of February 2015. This analysis seeks to update my long-standing UK general election forecast as of December 2013 that concluded in the expectations for an outright Conservative election victory in May 2015. The lesson learned from my forecast for the 2010 general election of a year earlier for the Conservative small majority that on election day was only secured via a previously inconceivable by all coalition with the Liberal Democrats. This teaches to not discount that which seems the most improbable, which today would either be for a Labour or Conservative outright majority victory, as the consensus strongly favours another hung parliament. In doing the maths, there are a total of 650 seats up for grabs, and for a political party to secure a majority will need to win at least 326 seats or to go into coalition with a smaller party. Therefore, the starting point for this analysis will be to first determine how many seats the smaller parties are likely to subtract from the 650 total left to be split between Labour and Conservative. The first allocation is straightforward in extracting Northern Ireland's 18 seats, which for historic reasons elects local party MPs. Then there are the other smaller parties such as the Greens and Wales, Plaid Cymru, likely to total no more than 4 MPs. Thus, all the others total just 22 seats. The UK dodged a bullet last September as the tunnel vision SNP failed in their efforts for the UK to disintegrate that would have resulted in a catastrophic breakup of the UK, as I covered at the time. However, the SNP are not done with the UK, for their new cunning plan is to literally bankrupt Britain as part of a minority Labour government, to financially bleed the UK dry, leaving it a hollow husk before declaring independence, as illustrated by SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon's recent statements, to force the UK to print an extra 180 billion of debt to finance spending on vested interests. However, against this we compare the austerity coalition's debt record that by May 2015 will have borrowed an extra 130 billion more than they said they would in 2010, and in total added 500 billion to Britain's national debt. Now imagine what would happen under an anti-austerity SNP Labour government, who would print at least 1 trillion of new debt that would increase the total to 2.5 trillion, that would result in rampant inflation, i.e. probably exceed 10% per annum. Just as spectacular has been the collapse in the oil price as is the collapse in the SNP's economic master plan for an independent Scotland that was wholly based on reaping huge rewards from North Sea oil exports, where SNP propaganda had convinced many Scots to effectively vote to commit economic suicide. That came close to achieving the catastrophe on the basis of a propaganda implying raising of North Sea oil tax revenues from 7 billion to 11 billion per year, that today, barely a few months later, has evaporated to virtually nothing. So be under no illusion. that an inept Miliband government will be wagged by the SNP tail will be able to do anything other than to plunge from worsening crisis to the next, probably even worse than Gordon Brown's financial collapse, all the way to the disintegration of the United Kingdom. Virtually all of the pollsters point to a Labour bloodbath in Scotland, as they could lose as many as 40 seats to the SNP, with suggested tallies of as high as 57 SNP MPs, as illustrated by May2015.com. However, I expect many more Scots to vote with their heads as they did last September, so the SNP surge is being grossly overestimated. Therefore, I expect the SNP to win far lower tally of around 35 seats. Clearly, this would suggest that a Labour SNP government is possible, which in my opinion will be a disastrous outcome for Britain, and I can imagine following the first year of a Labour SNP government, people will be looking back with nostalgia to the stability of the current condemned coalition. The Liberal Democrats appear to be feeling all of the pain and none of the gains of being in coalition with the Conservatives, as their poll ratings are literally in a state of meltdown as a consequence of betrayals or pledges made to the electorate, such as to scrap tuition fees, which the Lib Dems instead supported the increasing of from £3,000 to £9,000 per year.
First, we would campaign against any lifting of the cap on tuition fees. Both the Labour and the Conservative parties are clearly intending to come together after this general election and raise the cap from 3,000 to maybe several thousand more, as demanded by a number of universities. We think that's wrong. Secondly, we want to see tuition fees removed. I wish we could do it overnight. It used to be our plan to do it overnight. Now we're going to have to do it in incremental steps over a 6-year period because, of course, money is tight. That would mean, for instance, that if you are an undergraduate in your last year of your first degree, then your tuition fees would be removed for that last year of study. In the next year of a Liberal Democrat government, we would remove the fees for your penultimate year of study, and would start putting a cap on the fees on part-time students, and so on until all fees are removed over 6 years. It's fair, it's right. I don't think young people should be saddled with so much debt before they've even taken the first step in the adult world of work.
And according to the mainstream media, even the Lib Dems' dear leader, Nick Clegg, could lose his Sheffield Hallam seat to Labour, though he probably should manage to hold on to it, but with a much reduced majority. In terms of the number of seats, whilst the Lib Dems will be decimated, nevertheless I do not see the bloodbath quite as bad as the often quotes of wipeout to as few as 20 seats, because the Lib Dem vote tends to be highly concentrated, so requiring a greater swing to lose a seat. Also that the Lib Dem seats tend to have the opposition vote more evenly split between Labour and Conservative, thus making it much harder for either to win a Lib Dem seat. And of course, parties in government usually tend to do much better on election day than opinion polls suggest. Therefore, rather than 22 MPs, I see the Lib Dems at least retaining 30 seats and could even retain as many as 35 seats. So my conclusion is for the Lib Dems to secure 30 MPs that would still be enough to contribute towards another coalition government. The latest ONS immigration statistics once more illustrate the failure of the condemned government to control immigration, where the past 5 years have just been a continuation of the Labour catastrophe, a 15-year-long megatrend of importing over 3 million people, most of whom are as vested interests expected to vote Labour. Net immigration has accelerated to 298,000 per year, now soaring to the same level of out-of-control immigration as under the last Labour government, which is set against David Cameron's 2010 broken promise to cut net immigration to the tens of thousands by the end of this Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, before the last election, the Prime Minister made a no ifs, no buts promise on immigration. Can he remind the House exactly what that promise was?
Well, we promised to cut net migration. We've cut it from outside the European Union, but it's increased from inside the European Union, not least because we've created more jobs than the rest of the European Union put together.
He was rather coy about his precise promise, Mr. Speaker. It was in his contract with the British people. Net migration cut to the tens of thousands. But now it's at 298,000, higher than when he took office. And here's what he said in the contract. Here's what he said. If we don't deliver our side of the bargain, vote us out in 5 years' time. When he said that, did he mean it?
There are two reasons for high migration.
The most recent surge is as a consequence of opening the borders to Romania and Bulgaria, resulting in huge social consequences for settled communities and public services such as housing, health, and in school places. Whilst BBC propaganda tends to paint a picture of hard-working migrants contributing more than they take out, however, analysis by Open Europe demonstrates this to be false, once factoring in-work benefits, i.e. for single workers of £93.77 per week against zero for those working in Poland and Bulgaria. Whilst families with 2 children result in average in-work benefits payments of £330 per week, which is set against salary deductions of just £31 that results in a huge benefits net subsidy to the migrant workers of £300 per week. Therefore, the truth is that migrants across Eastern Europe and Southern Europe come to the UK for benefits. It's just that these are in-work benefits for which there is an economic cost in terms of the budget deficit and unemployed youth. Whilst UKIP poll rating of 14% implies 20 to 30 seats, as do many overconfident UKIPers, however, UKIP's Achilles heel is that it is seen as a one-trick pony, immigration, which ranks 4th on voters' lists after the NHS, economy and welfare state. So whilst UKIP's 14% will translate into more seats, however, I don't see it being anywhere near the implied 20, but more likely to total between 4 and 6 seats. Therefore, I expect UKIP to win 5 seats in total. An analysis of political funding implies that another condemned government is probable, not just because the Conservatives tend to raise more for election spending than Labour, but also that the Liberal Democrats outraise both UKIP and SNP combined. Against all expectations, the coalition government, despite out-of-control immigration, has managed to reverse the early 2-year trend for rising unemployment. UK unemployment has now fallen to its lowest level for 6 years, down nearly 500,000 on a year ago, with expectations for another 100,000 jobs to be created in the quarter up to election day, thus boosting the Tories' election prospects. However, the headline rate masks the truth of real unemployment that currently stands at over 9 million. As coalition government has failed to reverse the Labour catastrophe of creating near 10 million vested interests of economically inactive working age population, which also warns of what would happen under Labour, a resumption of the trend for increasing the number of vested interests on benefits that are not included in the official unemployment statistics. For Britain, the most critical economic driver, far beyond interest rates, inflation or even unemployment, is the trend in average house prices, for the fundamental reason that positive housing market sentiment is that which makes the difference between the UK economy being in recession or in an economic boom, which any government of the day fully realises, and why the coalition government has bent over backwards to first ignite and then to target a maintenance of the house prices bull market right into May 2015 general election through a myriad of taxpayer funded schemes such as zero interest rates, the Help to Buy scheme, stamp duty cut, and the just announced 20% house purchase discount scheme, which is on top of a continuous flood of liquidity forcing savers to spend or invest depreciating value of bank deposits into primarily bricks and mortar, as I've covered at length for several years now. It is now 14 months since I published my UK house prices 5-year trend forecast that concluded in expectations for a 55% rise by the end of 2018. The updated Halifax average house prices graph to January 2015 of £190,000 shows that the UK housing bull market paused from August to December 2014 before resuming its bull trend in January. House prices are currently showing a deviation of 3.3% against the forecast trend trajectory. If the current deviation continued to persist, then this would result in a 15% reduction in the forecast outcome to approx 40% rise by the end of 2018. This graph further illustrates the fall in momentum during the second half of 2014 and the recent surge back higher to 10% as UK house prices look set to soar to an annual inflation rate of well above 10% per annum, timed to just reach their peak during May 2015 at probably around 12%, though unlikely to accelerate any higher due to weakness in house prices in the southeast. Clearly, the house prices driven economic mini boom is timed to peak during May 2015 at approximately 12% per annum. That would just exceed the 10% of Labour's mini boom into May 2010 election, which therefore implies the Conservatives should continue to improve right into polling day. So house prices are suggesting a very similar election result for the Conservatives to that of 2010. My long-standing general election forecast based on house prices is for a probable Conservative general election victory. The updated graph illustrates that the Conservatives are virtually on track to achieve the original forecast outcome for an outright election victory, which no one today is advocating. The remaining balance of 558 seats, split according to the consensus view such as May2015.com, would result in Labour leading on 281 seats against Conservatives on about 277. However, this analysis suggests that the opinion polls are grossly underestimating the number of seats the Conservatives will actually win on May 7th, where there is even a chance for the Conservatives to win an outright majority, though probability favours another hung parliament. However, given the UKIP surge, it will be tough for the Conservatives to retain their current tally of 302 MPs, as I expect at least 3 will be lost to UKIP and many more lost to Labour, against which at least a handful will likely be gained from the Lib Dems, which therefore suggests that the Tories will achieve a seat total in the 290s. My forecast conclusion is for the Conservatives to win 296 seats at the May 7th general election and Labour second on 262 seats, and the full seats per political party breakdown as shown. Therefore, the most probable outcome is for a continuation of the condemned coalition government on 326 seats, i.e. Conservative 296 plus Lib Dem 30. where any shortfall would likely find support from the DUP's 8 seats. The alternative is for a truly messy Labour, Liberal, SNP supported chaotic government on about 327 seats, which in my opinion would be a truly disastrous outcome for Britain, nearly as bad as if Scotland had voted for independence last September. Another possibility is that should the Conservatives do better than forecast, i.e. secure over 300 seats, but still fail to win an overall majority, then they may choose to go it alone with the plan to work towards winning a May 2016 general election. The bottom line is that the opinion polls do not reflect how people will actually vote on May 7th, when they are faced with the stark choice of a steady as she goes condemn government or take a huge gamble on Ed Miliband's Labour Party. So in my opinion, several millions of voters will choose to play it safe with the condemned government, which thus is the most probable outcome.